So I'm delighted today to welcome Alison Brown. Alison's from Shared Care Scotland, and they're going to talk about their funding programmes. I have to say this is something that is particularly interesting to me. I was a full-time carer for my mother for a year, Alison. So
right, okay,
you know,
so
I know the importance of respite, and I was in a fortunate position where I had good family friends that were able to help to provide that, but not everybody is. So
sure.
I think this stuff's so important in terms of supporting carers, and I know that's just the one strand that you've got, but really delighted that you're able to talk to us a bit about your funding programmes today. So I'm going to stop whittering on and let you get straight to the point. I think you've already said to me that you will send me the slides after the presentation so we can send those out. So if you want copies of the slides, I'll just automatically send them out to all people who'd registered for the session. But for now, delighted to welcome Alison Brown from Shared Care Scotland. Thank you, Alison.
Thanks, Naomi. I'm just going to share my screen. And just right, okay, that should be us. Okay, good morning, everyone. And thanks, Naomi, for inviting me along today. My name is Alison Brown, and I'm the Short Breaks Fund Manager at Shared Care Scotland. So today, what I just wanted to cover was a few slides on what Shared Care Scotland does, and more importantly, the Short Breaks Fund, which is it's our funding stream to support unpaid carers and the people that they look after. So who is Shared Care Scotland? Well, we're a very, very small team of 6 people. We're based in Dunfermline, but we have a Scotland-wide remit. So we cover the whole of Scotland from our offices in Dunfermline. Well, it was our offices in Dunfermline up until last year. It's now home office working, but I think there's plans for us to come back into the office towards September. So Shared Care Scotland has been around for 30 years, and we very much are about focusing on improving short breaks and respite care across Scotland, and that is for unpaid carers and the people that they care for. And I think, if anything, over lockdown, it's highlighted the very, very difficult role that unpaid carers do and they undertake. And obviously, as an organisation, we are there to try and ensure that they get access to short breaks as much as possible. So just a quick run through some of the activities that Shared Care Scotland provide. So we work with Scottish Government and other national carer organisations, and we are there to try and develop and promote good practice in short breaks. And what we're hoping is that that good practice in short breaks is going to lead to much more choice and flexibility for unpaid carers and the people that they care for. We've moved away from perhaps this traditional view of what respite care looks like. Respite care traditionally was about the person that you look after perhaps going into some kind of day service or some kind of residential for a weekend. And that absolutely has its place. But we have moved over the years to that respite being much more flexible. And sometimes the respite, the person that is looking after someone wants to do something with the person that they care for. And sometimes the carer wants to have a break from the person that they care for. And sometimes the person who's been looked after also wants to have a break from their carer. So really what we're trying to do is open up the kind of short break respite service arena, I guess, and get people to think a wee bit more out of the box about what a short break would look like for them. We also gather evidence and share intelligence, so we commission some reports and some research. One that we did, which was published last year, was around holidays or isolation. And this was a piece of research that we commissioned to look at the availability of services and activities for disabled children and young people, particularly over the school holidays. So what we were hearing from funded organisations and unpaid carers was that this was a particularly difficult time for them, because the routine of going to school had stopped for Easter, for summer, for the October break, for Christmas, and there were very little services that were available for disabled children and young people. So that was a fairly substantial piece of research that we undertook, and that was fed into policymakers. So, for example, it was fed into Scottish Government, and I'm not sure if anybody is aware, but there's actually just been an announcement this week that Scottish Government has made available, don't quote me on this, but I think it's about £15 million to local authorities to provide services and activities over the holiday period, not just for disabled children and young people, but certainly disabled children and young people are mentioned. And we're hoping, we would like to think, that the report that we had commissioned had actually fed into that. We also provide an information service. So this is for unpaid carers who are just looking for some information or support on where they could go for information on what help might be out there for them, who do they speak to in their local authority to ensure that they have a carers support plan in place. We also provide information on short breaks that are available, so perhaps on accommodation that is perhaps accessible for the person that the carer is looking after. And we also provide information on all the projects that we currently fund and have funded over the past few years. And I will give you a link to where you would find that on our website. We also offer a project which is called Hospitality, and this is where we partner up with tourism operators, so organisations that maybe have hotels, they maybe have a restaurant somewhere. For example, St Andrews University is one of our hospitality partners. And what these partners do is that they offer out their accommodation or discounts to unpaid carers. And we work with them to ensure that those breaks are offered through the carer centres. So for unpaid carers, they can access hospitality breaks through their local carer centre, although I should actually point out that not every carer centre is signed up to hospitality. So at the moment, I think we're about 12 or 13 carer centres out of the 32 local authority areas. But again, if anybody wants some information on that, then I'm happy to share that with Naomi and she can send it out. And the other thing that we operate, which is really what I think people are here to find out about this morning, is the Short Breaks Fund, which is a fund that goes out to third sector organisations to support them to provide services and activities for unpaid carers and, equally importantly, the people that they care for. So a bit about the Short Breaks Fund. So the Short Breaks Fund was established in 2010. So this year we celebrated our 10-year anniversary. And the fund provides grants to third sector organisations supporting unpaid carers to allow them to take a break from their caring role. The aim is to increase the range and availability of short breaks across Scotland. And again, it's looking at the choice, the flexibility that carers could have to take those breaks. So it's really about allowing carers to take the right break at the right time for them. So whether that's a weekend away with the person that they care for, or whether it's some regular short break on a monthly basis while the cared for a person attends some activities, it really is absolutely down to the funded projects to agree in consultation with the carers and the cared for people as what is going to be the right break for them. And the Short Breaks Fund is funded by Scottish Government, and it's funded on a rolling annual basis, which unfortunately means that we cannot fund an organisation for more than 1 year. We ourselves, I should have pointed out at the beginning, we're only funded on a rolling annual basis as well. And thankfully, we have been funded for a long time. And certainly Short Breaks Fund has been funded for the last 10 years. But there is always that slight nervousness about February time when we think, right, okay, we've not quite heard back from Scottish Government yet. Is our funding okay for the following year? And thankfully it has been. And I've got no reason to think that that's not going to continue. But it is important to point out that we are only funded on an annual basis, which is why we can only fund organisations for a year at a time, which is not great. We appreciate that, because sometimes, particularly if it's a new project, it does take time to bed in, it takes time to recruit staff, and sometimes, you know, you're 6 months into a funded project and you've only got another 6 months to deliver. But unfortunately, there's nothing that we can do about that. But as I say, we are just grateful that we are still funded after all these years. So the Short Breaks Fund itself is split into 4 funding programmes, 3 of which are operated by Shared Care Scotland. And those programmes are Better Breaks, Creative Breaks and Time to Live. And the 4th funding programme is called Take a Break Scotland, and that's operated by the Family Fund. And if anybody's looking for some information on that fund, again, I can make that available. Just to let you know that that fund is currently open, Take a Break Scotland. It only opens between, it's usually about mid-May, and it closes at the end of June. So it's only open once a year. So if anybody wants some information on that, I'm certainly happy to provide that for you. So the first one that I want to speak about is our Better Breaks programme. And this opens each year on the 1st of October. And this funding is for third sector organisations that are providing short breaks and services for disabled children and young people, and they've got to be aged 20 or under, and their carers. And their carers can either be adult carers and or young carers. We have around about £1 million in funding each year to award to organisations. And the maximum award that can be funded in any 1 year is £35,000, and that is for an incorporated organisation. If you're an unincorporated organisation, the maximum that you can apply for is up to £5,000. However, at the time of your application, if you are currently unincorporated but are moving to become incorporated, then you can apply for up to the £35,000 limit. But if you're awarded funding before that funding was released, we would need to see evidence that you have become incorporated. Although we say that the maximum award is up to £35,000, we are always oversubscribed on not just this fund, but all our funds. And our average award last year was around 15,500. Now, that's not to say that we didn't fund organisations up towards the 35,000 level, because we did, but we had many organisations that are much smaller organisations, and we're only looking for maybe £2,000, £3,000, £4,000 in funding. So it kind of evens itself out. The funding must be spent, the closing date for the Better Breaks programme is usually around mid-November, and there's a whole assessment process that has got to be gone through. We put all our applications out to external assessors, so we don't make decisions in-house, but we do obviously look at all the applications, we make our comments before they go out to assessors, we ask them to maybe dig a bit deeper in certain areas of the application, we might have a query on a budget, and we obviously give some guidance to our assessors if we need them to dig a bit deeper into those applications. Once they've been externally assessed, they come back into to our team, the team of 2, which is myself, I'm the Short Breaks Fund Manager, and Amanda Moffat, who's the Short Breaks Fund Grant Officer. And I do the moderation on the applications just to make sure that it's been a fair assessment and that really we're in agreement with what the assessor is recommending. And that then goes up to a full panel, a grants allocation panel, which is made up of independent people who come along and make decisions on the funding applications. We have somebody from local authority, we have somebody from Scottish Government, although they're only there as an observer, they don't have a decision-making role. We have our GAP chairs are very well respected in the grant making arena. They've held very senior roles with two very large organisations. We have unpaid carers that sit on that panel, and we have some organisations that have benefited from short breaks funding. So there's a whole range of different people with different skills that sit on a panel, and that makes it very, very independent. The funding that's awarded must be spent between the 1st of April and the 31st of March the following year. And again, that's because we're only funded for a year, so it's all to do with when our funding comes in from Scottish Government. And that's really the same for each of the funds that we offer, but I'll speak a bit more when I get to those funds. So that's Better Breaks. The second one that we operate is Creative Breaks, and this fund is actually open at the moment. So, well, sorry, it's not open at the moment, it's just closed to applications, but we're in the process of going through all the applications at the moment, and they'll be going out to assessors hopefully next week. The Creative Breaks opens on the 1st of April each year. The timeline for that is it opens 1st of April and it will close towards the end of May. And the panel will sit towards the end of September, usually between sort of mid-September and the end of September. And the projects that are awarded funding must deliver those projects between the 1st of October and have them finished by the 30th of September the following year. Now, it's not to say that the project must last that whole year. It's just what we're saying is the project cannot start before the 1st of October, and it must absolutely definitely be finished by 31st of March. There have been some exceptions to that, mainly because of COVID last year, but I'm going to touch on that maybe later on in the presentation, because we've had to work with a whole range and number of funded organisations, both in Creative Breaks and Better Breaks, that because of COVID were not able to deliver on the projects that we had funded them to deliver on. And so we've had to work with them over the last year and a bit to agree project variations and extensions to their funding period. But Creative Breaks is different from Better Breaks in that these short breaks and services are aimed at carers of adults. So that's adults, disabled adults, aged 21 and over, and young carers, and those that they care for. And it's very important to stress that with all our funding, what we're looking for is mutual benefit here. So the projects, the services, the activities, they've got to benefit both the carer and the person that they're caring for. It doesn't mean to say that you've got to provide services for both of them. So for example, in Creative Breaks, if you were providing services for example, a young carer project, so say it was a residential for young carers, what we would be looking for is evidence within the application form that the person that they look after, and that could be a sibling, it could be a parent, it could be a grandparent, what we're looking for is some evidence that the cared for person is also having some kind of break. It's not enough just to assume that because the young carer's away having their own break, then the cared for person is also having a break. So we need to have some evidence of that. We're not saying that you would have to provide the activities or services, absolutely not, but we need to ensure that the cared for person is having some kind of meaningful break. We have less in this funding pot. We have around 600,000 in each funding year, and that can go up or down. It sometimes does go up because on occasion we have projects that have not been able to deliver on their project, so they've either returned the full grant to us or they've returned a partial amount to us. And what we do is we just add that into the funding pot, but we never know until nearer the panel date what that fund's going to stand at. So we always say, you know, in our initial workshops that we provide when the fund's open, that there's around £600,000 in funding. The same criteria in terms of the maximum you can apply for, again, is 35,000 in this fund, and that's for incorporated organisations. And again, if you're unincorporated, it's £5,000 is the maximum that you can apply for. The average award in this one is a bit lower. Last year it was just short of about £11,000, but again, that's not to say that we don't fund organisations, you know, up at the 25, 29, 32,000 level, because we do. But we obviously have a lot of organisations that are only asking for smaller amounts of money. And what I should point out is that we always ask in the application if there is a part funding option. So for example, if you apply for £15,000, we will be asking you, is £15,000 the absolute minimum that you require from us to allow this project to go ahead? Or are there some nice to haves within that funding request that would still allow the project to go ahead, but it would reduce your ask from us? And the reason for that is because our grants allocation panel is keen to fund as many organisations as possibly can. And as you can probably appreciate, the very fact that we've got much less money in this fund, we are even more oversubscribed in creative breaks than we are in better breaks. Okay. The third one that we provide is a fund called Time to Live. Now, this is the only one that is not a competitive funding programme. What happens is we work with all the carer centres. So it's usually a carer centre in each local authority area. So over the 32 local authority areas, we have 30 delivery partners that provide Time to Live grants. The exception is in Fife, where our delivery partner is the third sector interface, so that's Fife Voluntary Action. But in every other local authority area, it's the carer centre. And we have approximately £500,000 in funding that we distribute via the carer centres in any 1 year. And how that has worked out is there's a formula that we've come up with, which is based on the carer population equation in each area. Unfortunately, it's a bit outdated because we were using the last census for that, and obviously, you know, the census that was due has not happened. And what we work on is this percentage. So depending on the carer population in each local authority area will depend on the amount of funding that goes into that carer centre. So for example, in Fife, the funding that goes to Fife Voluntary Action is around about £35,000. But up in Orkney, it's just short of £3,000. So it depends on the population in each local authority area. And how this operates is, again, this is on an annual basis, and we normally, again, we award this funding to run from the 1st of October to the 30th of September the following year. And the carer organisation, we provide the funding to the carer organisation, who then operate their own micro grant scheme. And that's for carers of adults, and it's only for carers, although obviously we would like to see some demonstration of mutual benefit, but it's the carer that applies to the carer centre for an award, and that's to allow them to take some kind of short break for themselves. And that can either be with the person that they care for, or it could be with a friend, it could be with another family member, or it's something that they might want to do on their own. The approximate grant per individual is about £300, but again, that could be as little as £50, and in some occasions it can go up to about £400, £450. And again, it's very much based on the carer situation and what it is that the carer would like to do with that funding. And what we did find last year in lockdown, Time to Live as a grant, a lot of carers were previously using that funding to perhaps go on, you know, a weekend away, or have a spa break, or, you know, something that got them out of the house. But obviously with lockdown, those short breaks were not a possibility at all. And even as lockdown eases, and did ease slightly last year and is easing a bit more now, what we were finding that carers were still very nervous about going out there anyway, and they really did not want to be doing anything that would, you know, potentially have an effect on the cared for person. You know, if they'd been out, you know, I don't know. I don't even know if spas were allowed to be open last year, but say they were. But you know, what they didn't want to do is go out and enjoy that short break and then come back, but be fearful that they might pass something on to the person that they care for. And in a lot of instances, obviously, the care for people were shielding. So what we were finding is that carers were becoming very, very inventive about what they were going to use their funding for. So we saw all sorts of absolutely fantastic ideas coming through. We had lots of carers that bought garden furniture, that maybe bought a Kindle and a Kindle subscription. Some bought an Alexa to sit down in the bottom of the garden with and listen to some music. People were buying online yoga sessions. We had one lady buy boogie bounce sessions and a trampoline to go with that. And it was great to actually see that carers were still able to take a break, although unfortunately it was sometimes very much confined either to their home or to their garden. But the important thing was that carers were still having a break in some shape or form. And that's Time to Live. The reason I should point out that this one is only available to carers of adults, so, you know, adults looking after disabled adults aged 21 and over, is because the fund, the fourth strand that I mentioned earlier, which is Take a Break Scotland, that's the one that is for parent carers. So it's parent carers of disabled children and young people. And that fund is the one that is open to them to have a short break with their children, not Time to Live, unfortunately. Although last year, with authority from Scottish Government and through working with Family Fund, we were actually able to open up Time to Live to parent carers last year, because we actually received a substantial amount of additional funding from Scottish Government. And one of the things that they did allow us to do was open that up to parent carers as well. So that was very, very welcome. We actually ended up with an additional 830,000 from Scottish Government since June last year, up to January this year. And that was very, very, very much welcomed by unpaid carers, regardless of whether they were looking after an adult or looking after a child. So just in summary, the Short Breaks Fund, the three strands that Sharecare Scotland operate, are open to third sector organisations. The grant that is awarded must be spent in the funding year in which it was awarded. So for creative breaks, it must be spent between 1st of October and 30th of September the following year. For better breaks, it must be spent between the 1st of April and the 31st of March of the following year. And we would normally have around £2 million that we give out in grant funding in any one year. As I say, last year was exceptional. We ended up with an additional 830,000. There's no indication that that's going to be, available this year. We can but hope, and obviously if it is available, then we will absolutely make sure that that goes out to third sector organisations. And since we opened up the Short Breaks Fund in 2010, we've awarded around £22.5 million over those 10 years. So a substantial amount of money that is gone out to support unpaid carers and the people that they care for. My contact details are up there. If you want some additional information, if you just want to have a chat with myself or Amanda about whether Short Breaks Fund is for your organisation, or, for example, if you are a carer or you know someone who's an unpaid carer and you want some information on what services and activities are funded in your area, or you want to know a bit more about Time to Live, bearing in mind that that's an individual's application for a fund, then either Amanda or myself would be more than happy to chat that through with you. I have put our phone number up there, but what I would say is, it's best just to drop us an email. We do pick up voicemails on the office phone, but to be honest, over the last year, we've really just corresponded through emails. So what to do is, if you want to have a chat with me, drop me an email, give me a contact number and a time that would suit you best, and I'll give you a call back and we can chat through any one of the funds that I've spoken about today, or in general can chat to you about what we do at Shared Care Scotland. And that's me.
Thank you so much, Alison. That was really helpful, and I think a comprehensive run through of the three funds. So I know will be really useful. I wrote down a few comments as we went through, and there's been some specific questions.
Okay.
And I think I found the link to the fund you were talking about from Scottish Government. So I'm going to share it in the chat function.
Yeah.
I'm hoping I've got the right one. But
I think it's around £15 million that's going out to all local authorities. But there's also an extra £5 million somewhere as well.
It's got the link I found said 20 million. So I was searching for it while you were speaking a little bit, because I thought it might be of interest to people.
Yeah, sorry, I could actually have sent you the link for that now.
It's absolutely fine. I've put it up in the chat, so I think I've got the right one.
Right, okay. I'll have a check, but I'm sure you have.
Awesome.
It's literally just been announced. Yeah.
Yes, it had just been announced, I think, relatively recently. So. Because you always do a search and find things that were a few years old.
I know.
So I was carefully trying to look before I shared the wrong thing. I got perhaps a couple of questions and some stuff that's just come through in the chat. So I guess maybe coming to one of the questions, if someone was in the middle of an ongoing project, is your organisation able to fund something for part of a year, or for if it's a 3-year project for a year of it, because obviously they can't bid in for a 3-year project.
Sure.
In that way.
Yeah, we would happily look at that. We appreciate that a year's funding. If you've worked in, this sector for a long time, and I have worked in this sector for a long time, and I know that we always wanted at least the 3-year funding. Unfortunately, we're not in a position to do that because we are only funded for a year ourselves, but we will absolutely, definitely consider applications for your project. If it's a 3-year funded project or it's a 3-year project that you want to run, we will certainly look at part funding that in your first year. We will take an application from you the second year, and we would consider a second year funding. So we're happy to take applications for continuation projects. So there's ways around it. Obviously, there's no guarantees that you will be funded in any funding year. But obviously, the more information that you can give us, if it's a continuation project, the more information that you can give us about, how the previous the currently funded project is operating, what changes you might want to make, what learning, and we're very, very keen to hear on the learning side of things. We will absolutely take that into consideration. So we're happy to fund that, or certainly consider funding that, but we can only take an application on a yearly basis.
Thank you. I mean, it was helpful. I actually think it's helpful sometimes for people to understand why that's the case. And obviously you face the same challenges yourself, because I think in an ideal world, we'd all like to be funded over a longer period, and we all end up kind of just starting things going, I think we'll be okay for next year. And you have to have that faith. I think that's very much how our sector's operated.
Absolutely. We do. And we do have the faith. No reason to think that funding would be pulled, but who knows? We cannot 100% say it's fine. So when we're about to, when we start doing a promotion for, for example, our next fund to open will be Better Breaks in October. So we'll start to do the promotion for that. When are we going to start doing the promotion for that? Probably about end of August, September time. And that's absolutely fine for this funded year. It's probably more when we're looking at opening Creative Breaks next year, because that doesn't open until a new financial year. So we always kind of hang off and only start to promote that fund when we know for absolutely definite that our funding has been confirmed for that following year. So and that can sometimes come later than we all hope for as well. I think we've all been there at times in our working lives. Can I just come back just on that kind of one about the funding part, like programs every year, because obviously a lot of funders generally always want to fund new activity. Yes.
Would that be the case with you, or would it be that if someone had, I mean, I didn't get that impression, but I thought it was helpful for clarity. So we are absolutely of the opinion that there are some projects that are tried and tested, and that it's, we have funded organisations since the very beginning, funding year 2011, and we still get applications from those organisations to fund them for 2021, 22, and we're happy to do that. We do appreciate that there are tried and tested models, and if something works, then obviously we're not going to say, well, actually, do you know what, it's not very innovative any longer, it's a bit stale. If an organisation demonstrates within their application that they have carried out their consultation, and the carers and the cared for person is saying, this is what we want you to deliver, this is when we want it delivered, and these are the activities that we want to take part in, then that's absolutely fine. We are not saying to people, only come back if you're changing something with your project. There's absolutely no point. So that decision was made, I think, just a couple of years ago, because originally when the Short Breaks Fund came out, was launched, it was very, obviously it was very new, and it was very specific about additional short breaks for carers, unpaid carers, and people that they care for. And so obviously all the applications that were coming in were new, because they were new to us. And then obviously, as the years have gone on, there are some organisations that we absolutely expect an application from them each year. There are still no guarantees that they will be funded. And I think that's one thing that I would point out, is that whilst we're happy to fund an organisation each year, what we don't want to see in the application is complacency and a poor application, because, oh, it's okay, it's the Short Breaks Fund, we've had funding for the last 5 years, of course we'll get it this year, and we don't really need to put much of an effort into your application form. That doesn't go down well with our panel members, because we do feel that, organisations shouldn't be reliant on that, because there are lots and lots of organisations that were not in a position to fund. And what would happen
is that our panel obviously are very keen to fund new projects, new organisations that have not benefited from the Short Breaks Fund before. And sometimes there is that dilemma. Oh, this is a project that's been funded for the last 7 years. Here's, 5 new projects. How do we balance that? Because our funding's not gone up since we started. So, it becomes more difficult each year. And that's why I would say that if you're a currently funded organisation, you still have to put the effort into your application form and still treat it as if we know nothing about you. We know nothing about your project. So you've still got to demonstrate to us that you know your beneficiary group, you've consulted with them, your costings are all as accurate as they possibly can be. Yeah, but equally we're happy to fund pilots. So if an organisation makes an approach to us, perhaps we've funded them to do something before, and this time they're saying, well, actually, we're not asking you to fund, that project this year. We have this new project. Would you consider it? We will certainly look at pilots. It really just depends on the applications, I guess, when they come in as to what.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some really helpful advice there, and I think, I guess, as someone that kind of observes what's going on in the funding arena quite a lot, I've seen other organisations that have kind of found it quite difficult when they've withdrawn funds from groups that have had it for many years, and that's a tough decision for a funder. I think people assume, oh, they've just done this to us, but actually that's it's a hard place to be, because the impact it might have. But I think that sense of
absolutely
not being complacent.
I remember at the first panel that I sat on, and I remember the chair at the time, because obviously I'm looking at these applications, and a lot of our organisations are dealing with disabled people that have the most complex of needs, and the carer's role is 24/7. And it's a difficult situation to be in. And, sometimes it's quite heartbreaking, and you're looking at this and thinking, oh my goodness, you really want to fund everything. But sometimes the application is not great. And that's why we have, when I said our applications go out to external assessors, they obviously go through the application, but they also have a telephone assessment with the applicant. So we appreciate that there are some people who are great at writing applications. There are some people that are not so great at writing applications. So the telephone assessment gives the person that's maybe not been able to articulate the project that well on paper, it gives them an opportunity to add additional information at the telephone assessment call. And sometimes, you're sitting at a panel and the panel are saying, no, we still don't understand what this project's about, and doesn't demonstrate that they've had the consultation, or it's quite a poor application. And I remember, the chair saying to me, Alison, it's not your fault if we can't fund them. It is not your responsibility. It is the responsibility of the applicant organisation to make sure that they submit as good an application as they possibly can. And unfortunately, we're not in a position to fund everybody, which is why we always ask for the part funding option, because we would rather fund more projects at a slightly lesser amount than less projects, but at a much higher amount.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's really helpful, I think, for people to get that sense and understanding as well that panels are independent. So the staff and the team are there to help you, but the decision making is ultimately, it's out of your hands as well. So
absolutely.
That's why the quality of the application is what people need to focus on. Now I've got just a couple of last
that's
questions.
fine.
One may be unfair to ask, because you may not know the answer to this, because it's actually more about the Scottish Government announcement and the 15 million. So the question, so I'm not sure you'll know it, but I'm going to ask, and you can say if you don't, because obviously it's quite new, so we may not know the details yet. Are local authorities obliged to share or award their share of the 15 million to groups to provide activities over the holidays, or will they be looking to spend that money themselves and run activities themselves?
I unfortunately don't know the answer to that, because it's literally just been announced and we did not get a lot of information about it. But what I can do is try and find out a bit more through Scottish Government, and I can send you any additional information, Naomi, and you can send it out.
That would be great. I mean, I'd also say I can see that that's coming through a CVS contact as well in terms of asking the question. So
okay.
It might be that information would be useful to send through those kind of interface and CVS networks as well.
Absolutely, yeah. But I'll see what else I can find out. And anything I can find out, I'm happy to share that with you.
Great, thank you very much. And someone's already thanked us for that as well. So
okay.
And then there's just a couple of last bits I just wanted to finish on. One was kind of just you touched on incorporated and unincorporated organisations. And again, I wanted to say to people, if you're unincorporated and you needed help going through corporate, getting incorporated, there is lots of help and support out there. So again, I just wanted to stress to groups that, I know that Just Enterprise run courses through Firstport. I've already mentioned the interfaces and the CVS networks. They do a lot of help with groups, taking them from being unincorporated to being registered. So again, there's always lots of people out there that will help you with that. So I just wanted to get that a point. And then I've just got a couple of...
Sorry, Naomi, could I just make a quick point about that?
Yeah.
My hand seems to be up. I'm not quite sure what I've done there. What we would never encourage an organisation to go down the route of incorporation just to access a higher amount from ourselves. That is very much a group, an organisation's own decision. And we would never say to somebody, look, you need to be incorporated, and therefore that is not for everyone. Incorporation is not for everyone. So do not go down that route just to try and access a bit more than the £5,000 for us, because A, there's no guarantees that you would get an award, and B, it just might not be the right thing for your organisation. And I would hate to think that organisations would feel any pressure from us, because we would not encourage that at all.
No, I would agree 100% with that statement, and I would like to think that when you're approaching organisations about incorporation, they would give you exactly that same advice in terms of, not promoting one structure over another. I always tell people it's worth asking a couple of people, because there are different opinions. Absolutely. And really understanding why you would do it and why you wouldn't want to do it is really important. So no, I think we'd hear the same if we had those organisations and support bodies on here as well. I just want to ask a couple of last questions. One's just related to kind of COVID. Obviously the money has to be spent in a given year, and I guess we've seen recently some of the challenges about holidays or breaks being booked and not being taken. How have you worked around that, and what do you, how do you get groups to think about that in terms of an application? Because I think that might just be worth touching on.
Sure. So when literally we had our panel on I think it was about the 17th of March last year, and we went into lockdown on the 23rd. So we knew that something was happening. And so we contacted all the organisations that had been successful, and we said, look, we appreciate that, things are going to be changing. We don't know what's going to be happening. So rather than pay out the funding at that point, what we said to them is, look, have a think about it. Obviously, nobody could have anticipated, how hard or how long we were going to be going into lockdown for. But what we'd said to funded projects is take some time out to think about this, because so it was better breaks that were about to start. So normally we would have some organisations that were providing Easter activity programmes. Obviously they had to stop. And then they would be providing summer holiday activity programmes, and then we knew that they were going to stop. So even within probably, I would say, a couple of months, we were already working with, out of 65 65 funded projects last year. I think we were working with 46 to agree a variation to the project that they wanted to offer, or agree an extension to that, because the last thing that we wanted to happen was A, for projects to return the money to us because we don't want it back, and B, for services and activities to stop completely. There are not enough services and activities out there for unpaid carers and the people that they look after in normal circumstances. And the last thing we wanted was, because of COVID, there was going to be even less support out there at a time that was proven and has proven to be even more crucial that those support services were in place. So we proactively contacted all our funded projects, not just in Better Breaks, but also in Creative Breaks as well, and said, let us know what you want to do, come up with different ideas, and as long as it worked in with our criteria, our eligibility criteria, with it being short breaks, activities, services, we were happy to agree. I would say probably about 90%, maybe even 95% of the requests that we had. Anybody that asked for an extension, we automatically awarded that. Some had extensions for 3 months, and then obviously as COVID and the lockdown went on, they came back and said, well, actually, could we have another 3 months? So we've extended many projects out by 6 months. We're not keen to extend it beyond that because it's quite complicated for our funding. So 6 months is the maximum that we've been able to extend, but we're happy to do that. We appreciate a lot of our services, a lot of our projects are place-based, face-to-face services. Obviously, that could not happen. And again, so many organisations that were so quick to react and put in place an alternative. And unfortunately, yes, it was via Zoom or Teams or some other kind of digital medium. But there were still some supports in there. A lot of organisations did some doorstop visits, so arranged to meet, 2 metres from the doorstep and just kind of check in and say, how's things? A lot of organisations made up pamper packs or wellness packs or activity packs if it was a Better Breaks project. So that there was still that support there. There were still things that could take place. We had one organisation who they were amazing in what they did, in that they offer a camp, a physical camp for a long weekend in both our funded programmes, and obviously that couldn't happen, and they moved to Camp in the Cloud, and they redesigned and delivered the whole of that weekend camp digitally. And I know that's not for everyone, absolutely, but it was amazing what they were able to deliver and the outcomes that were achieved, and the excitement, particularly in the Better Breaks, young children, and children, young people getting these boxes, activity boxes, and they didn't know what was in them. And, they weren't to open them till a certain time and on a certain day. And it was great. And we got the evaluation back from that. And, my goodness, these things that were an absolute lifeline to unpaid carers and the people that we look after. And what we then did, so our next fund that opened was obviously Creative Breaks last year, just at the start of lockdown, and we put a question, and we added in a question, obviously COVID-19's here, what would you do if we're still in lockdown? Not thinking for 1 minute that we still would be. And then as that year progressed, in the next round that opened, which was then Better Breaks in October last year, we actually just added that as a whole section into the application form. There's now a COVID-19 Plan B section. And what we say is, look, this is here for the foreseeable. Think about it in advance. And if you need to move to a Plan B, then we've got that additional information just now, because, you know, as you can imagine, there's only Amanda and I, and we were dealing with funded projects, not just from that current year, but from the previous years that were coming to an end. So we were dealing with hundreds of organisations that needed to change their services. So anything we could do to get people to think about that in advance, we've added that into the applications this year.
No,
I don't know if that answers your question. It's quite a long-winded answer. Sorry, Naomi.
It's a broad topic. No, it's really helpful, because I think particularly given the timing constraints and obviously the situation being one that could change, I think it's just helpful for people to know. And then my very last question, because we tend to try and finish, well, actually, I think we set these up to be shorter sessions, but there's been so much information. No, it's brilliant. I think it's been really useful, but I've learned a lot, which is always good. Just the last bit I always ask is, particularly from funders, is in addition to reading the FAQs and the information, because I always find it amazing how many people don't read the eligibility criteria. What would be your other top tip for anyone looking to apply?
Top tip to apply: come to one of your workshops.
There you go.
Even if you're a currently funded organisation, come to one of your workshops, because each year there are some small changes. And if you're an organisation that always applies, you might miss that because you think you know what our eligibility criteria is or what we're asking for in a certain section. So that would be my top tip. Come to one of the workshops, and if you can't come to one of the workshops, and obviously all our workshops are digital, which has been great in a way, because it's meant that regardless of where you live, so we've had people in Orkney, Shetland, Dumfries and Galloway attend the workshops. They wouldn't have been able to do that before because they were very much central belt. They were, you know, Stirling, Edinburgh, Glasgow, although I have gone down to Dumfries and Galloway and I have gone to Inverness. But we also do telephone support sessions. So if you can't come along to one of the workshops, or you do come along to one of the workshops and you've still got some questions, we usually have 4 half days that we allocate for people to phone in and just talk on a one-to-one basis. Obviously, we can't comment on an individual application, but sometimes people say, well, actually, we've got this idea. Would this be considered for funding? Or, yeah, so that would be my top tip. Keep in contact with us. And take advantage of the pre-application support that's available, because that will make a difference to you when you're applying.
Great, that's really helpful. And obviously I'll be sharing the slides. You'll have the contact details. I'd just like to say a big thank you, Alison, to you for joining us today. Really useful session. I hope people have got stuff out of this. They're probably all going off to also look at the 20 million that we also
I'm sure, yeah.
But really useful to have you join us, and we'll be sharing the video. So thank you very much. And
you're very welcome. I hope it was useful for everyone. And as I say, I'm happy to chat to anybody. You know, just drop me an email and I'll arrange a call with you.
Fabulous. Thank you, Alison. Have a great day, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.